Hey there, true crime doula here, yeah, in the living room. A couple of people have asked me if I could explain just a brief explanation, not a long-winded one, about this case that's in the news right now concerning a YouTube influencer. I guess you could call her a momfluencer. It's kind of an annoyingly cumbersome word. Um, there are a lot of people on YouTube who have family stories. They use their kids and their home situations as fodder for their YouTube channel. There are a lot of people who are critical of this, even when it doesn't come down to felony charges. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit about this story, and I have to watch my language here because I will be putting this on YouTube, and you can have your channel shut down if you use certain words. So you'll hear me say SA or CA. I think you'll be able to figure that out based on the context of the sentence. But anyway, so what we're talking about here is Ruby Franke, right? So she's a mom of six. She has this show, or she had this show, Eight Passengers. It was very popular on YouTube, but also criticized a lot for her harsh treatment of her children, which she put right on camera. Things like, I mean, nothing like really extreme or egregious, but things like punishments that seemed a little bit extra harsh, like I think her 6-year-old forgot her lunch one day at school. This happens to virtually every parent. And I know for sure I've like gotten back in the car and brought the lunch to school. It would never occur to me to like use that as a punitive teaching experience. Right? Like you're like, oh, you'll just go without lunch and then next time you won't forget. I mean, okay, fair enough. That's her parenting style. It's not really what I would do, but so that's like one example. Another example is, I don't know, one of the sons had to sleep on a beanbag chair. Listen, for all we know, he might have liked the beanbag chair and found it very comfortable. So I'm not exactly sure that these things, align with abuse or what have you, but that doesn't matter because what happened just in the past couple of weeks was that two of this woman's children, her youngest two, who are not being named to protect them, were being held against their will, and there was a lot of CA going on there. Not at her hands, though. So that's where this gets really interesting. Because if you just sort of like skim the headlines, you're going to think that Ruby Franke was the person who was creating this situation with her children. So the interesting thing is that, okay, they're Mormon. I have to like explain that piece to it because it does factor into the behavior here. Ruby, the mom, the one who had the show, partnered up with this woman named Jodi Hildebrandt. Right? Is that her name? Hildebrandt. Yeah, it's kind of a weird name to say. Hildebrandt with an NDT. So Jodi was Jodi was a licensed therapist. She lost her license in 2012 for doing something that you are not supposed to do as a therapist. She betrayed the trust of one of her clients and ratted him out to the Mormon, like, wait, what was it? It was the BYU, so that's Brigham Young honor code office. Like, what? How weirdly dystopian does that sound? The honor code office. Well, it doesn't matter exactly who they are, what they do, or how they administer with their punishments, but it was a breach of contract and trust between the client and the therapist. So she got in trouble for that. But the Mormon church they didn't think it was bad. They loved her. They were sending tons of clients to her. So anybody who had a family issue, whether it was like their husband was unfaithful or was watching I'm like, can I say porn? I'm going to say it anyway. Their husband was watching porn and or they had like a kid who was acting out, whatever it was, like a teenager or whatever, they would the so in the Mormon church you have bishops, right? So that's kind of like your sort of leader, guide person for a particular ward, and the wards are like congregations. So in 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 Jodi's world, she was seen as like the fixer for all problems. But what no one knew was what kind of like torture she was instilling on people. So what the really interesting thing about this case is not just that these two children, the youngest children of Ruby Franke, showed up. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. One was still in kind of custody, but the other one escaped through a window, went to a neighbor's house, begged for food. You can listen to the 911 call where the guy is like, this young boy has shown up at my house. He has ligature marks. There's duct tape on him and he's emaciated. So the evidence was right there. You can't really refute that. You know, it's not like her justification is that he had to be treated that way because he was accused of SA. So this is what she does. And so it's really, what I'm saying is the really interesting part about Jodi Hildebrandt is because she had worked with so many people in the Mormon church, there are lots of people who were victims of her behavior, her extreme psychological tactics. And one of them is her very niece, whose name is Jessie Hildebrandt. And so she has a podcast. She's being interviewed all over the place. You can hear her say that she was treated in this horrific manner at her parents' request. And if she came forward and said, Mom, Dad, she's depriving me of food. She's making me exercise until 3 o'clock in the morning. She's doing this or that. It would be like Jodi, the authority, would say, you see, she's still lying. She's still at it. So she was like the queen of gaslighting everybody. And the parents never knew that, you know, anything egregious was happening. There's another guy, Adam Steed, who came forward and said that he too was a victim of Jodi's particular style of therapy. His story is really sad. He was SA'd when he was in the Boy Scouts when he was younger, and he turned that into a case. There was a lawsuit, there was reparations made, etc. But the Mormon church didn't like that, so they kind of made it seem like he was the problem, not that he was the victim. And one thing led to another, and Jodi got a hold of this guy, convinced his wife that he was a predator and had all of these tendencies. And so he went into deep counseling with her and was systematically, psychologically tortured by her. So she's a terrible person. We should be very thankful that she has been arrested. No bail was set. Both she and Ruby Franke, remember Ruby is more the YouTube personality. Jodi is really only known in the Mormon circles in that particular area. 6 felony counts. So that's a big deal. And what's also very interesting is, like, you know, there are obviously children involved, and of course they're going to take their testimony and they will have lots of evidence based on the physical condition of those children. But then it seems very likely that these other victims of Jodi Hildebrandt will be able to come forward and tell their stories of how they were similarly abused at her hands. So that's all for now.